I just want to make sure that you can see or hear me. So type into the message panel where it says questions, for instance. That might be a good way, okay? All right, so it sounds like we have a live presentation. If that should change, just type up there that you can no longer hear or see the display. I don't always pay attention to the bottom panel, but if I catch it, it'll work. So let's jump into it. Again, litigating against the narcissist community war, how to win in court. We do these webinars every month, usually every month, the last Thursday of the month. I'm doing this one earlier because I'm away next Thursday. So let me jump right into it without further delay. All right, so let me give you a little background on what to expect for today's webinar for those that you have not attended mine in the past. The intention of these webinars was created a couple years ago when I realized that there's just so much information to give a client or a consultation on any topic, whether it's a topic you think is simple like child support or something complex like the divorce process. There's just never enough time to go through and give a client all the information that they're going to need for any case. So I started to compile these webinars every month as well as the other information on my website so that there's a resource that you can go to get information on specific topics, everything from broad topics like the divorce process down to something narrow like how do you fill out a case information statement and what should you include, so that you don't need to come to me, and for the clients of mine that don't need to actually incur the fees to get this kind of basic general information and guidance, and then can come back when they really need to get something specific or get some expertise. My average webinar is about 40 or 50 minutes. This one may be shorter because I'm really just looking to touch on sort of the major reoccurring issues that you're going to face so that you're prepared to deal with them. Again, I've done much more thorough webinars on divorcing a narcissist that are located on my website, micklinlawgroup.com, that will go into much greater detail what to expect. So this one may be anywhere from like 30 minutes or so. As you noticed, or probably have noticed, it's a one-way communication, which means hopefully you can hear me and see the display, but I cannot hear you. There is a way to ask questions, which is on your control panel on the right side. I believe it should be down towards the bottom on the right side of your screen. I always urge people, type your questions in as we go, even though I won't be addressing them until the end. That way you make sure that when it's fresh on your mind that you get it up there. I will spend as much time as needed to answer whatever questions you have once we conclude, so you don't need to worry about the timing issue. I just think it's better to go through the information first and then do all the questions. At the end, I may do a quick poll, just a couple questions, just to make sure that the webinar really fit your needs and to see if anything else needs to be compiled or produced for you. You also should be able to download the PowerPoint, which if you look, at least on my control panel at the bottom right, is the PowerPoint that I'll be using, so you will have access to it. The information here, again, it's more practical, not so much legal, but other webinars I do have a lot more legal information and case citations that may be relevant for download also, but I uploaded them here anyway. So there is the basic expectations for today. Let me give you a little background about myself. Those of you that haven't met or worked with me, it's a little background. I've been practicing over 20 years, probably like 22, 23 years. I started as a judicial law clerk for Judge Austin in the special civil part of Bergen County Civil Court. After that, I went to Kessler & Associates. I did complex commercial litigation for a number of years. I opened my practice in 2001, and at that time I was a general practice attorney, which means I did a little bit of everything. But I quickly concentrated my practice into divorce, custody, and family law, which is where it rests now. My focus inside of my firm is more of the high complex, high net worth cases, high complicated cases. But the firm overall does concentrate in divorce, family, and custody. I'm licensed in New Jersey, both state and federal courts. I do hold an inactive license in Pennsylvania. I don't really do anything about that because I like to focus on where my experience and expertise really is best. So I gave up Pennsylvania decades ago. I list some awards on my webinars, not to boast, but so that those of you that are working with me and those of you that are listening to me Can trust that I have some idea of what I'm talking about, and that I'm doing this because I care about making sure that people are informed about what they're dealing with. I got to update the slide. These go through from 14 through 15. I do have others through 16. I actually just received a book in the mail where it's called The Top Lawyers, Their Secrets to Success. I actually don't know what it came from, but my firm and I are highlighted in the executive spotlight on page 1. So that will eventually go up there. But like I said, this is really just so you know that I have some idea of what I'm talking about, that you can trust in what I'm trying to present to you. So let's talk about really quickly what we're going to cover. First, we're going to talk about borderline personality disorders. When I talk about narcissism, which is the phrase I commonly use for all of these disorders, but narcissism is the most common because it's the most problematic in a family court type litigation. But a borderline personality disorder is just that. It's an actual psychological condition, a psychological disorder. So you're going to find in all of the disorders that there are, and we're not going to go through them in depth. Again, they're in my other webinars. There are not only several different types of personality disorders, and they each carry their own specific characteristics, but there are going to be different graduations of each one. So some people, for instance, may be narcissistic or have narcissistic tendencies, while others are going to be truly a textbook narcissist. And the degree of difficulty that you are going to encounter is going to be almost equally proportioned to the degree of the severity of their disorder. So let's go next. So that's a definition. Range of behaviors we'll talk about again, just on a general basis, so you have some idea of what you're talking about, the different types. Like I said, touch on that narrowly. What causes them, I may go into a bit, and then, what to look for. Many people don't realize until after many years, or even sometimes in the litigation, that they are involved with somebody that has a borderline personality disorder. I'm sorry about the slides. I don't know what's going on here. What to expect, both in and out of litigation. I don't know what's going on with my slides here. I'm going to pause the screen. I apologize. I'm having a slide problem here. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. So stay with me. I don't know why the slides were repeating, because they're not repeating in my PowerPoint. So let me just see. I'm just going to try to get back to where we were. It's still continuing to do this. Hold on for 1 second. Going to put some music on just for a second so that you know that I'm still here. For some reason, it's still, I have the slides here, but yet when I try to advance them, it's not advancing. So I'm going to just jump into the first slide. All right, so I'm going to try to do it this way. Apologize for the technical problems. I actually never had this encountered before. Type into the question section now if you can still see and hear the PowerPoint. Anybody? Okay. Are you seeing the small picture and then the surrounding by the PowerPoint presentation? I know. All right, so I'm going to go back. In order to get back to the screen, I got to leave the view of my panel. So I'm going to trust that you can see this. Again, now tell me, I'm going to flip back to the quarter panel for a second. Tell me if you saw the screen a second ago with the PowerPoint and now you're looking just at my general Windows display. Anybody, just tell me if you saw the screen before. I'm going to do it again here and then flip back and just tell me if you saw it flip back. All right, so because I have to leave the control panel, so I will lose track if you start to lose the view. But all right, I'm going to do my best here. All right, so borderline personality disorder, for those of you we're just here, I went through the basic definition for the overall. One general characteristic is going to be instability, and it's mostly going to be instability in their personality and their mannerisms. Many of the BPDs are going to be very manipulative, and we'll go through in a moment in what ways that they can be both personally and in litigation. Unstable, because again, they're going to often be subject to outbursts and what would normally be considered unusual behavior. Mood changes, obviously, these are all sort of shades of gray of the same thing, but you're usually going to see the differences between how they are maybe in home and when you're alone as opposed to out in public. So let's talk about a little bit of the range of behaviors, because again, there's going to be several different personality disorders. Some, and again, this goes to my comment earlier about the degrees of severity, may have extreme violence. They can be very physically and mentally abusive. Projection, and there's going to be another phrase you'll see in a minute called gaslighting, which we'll go into also. But projection, they will often attribute their conduct to you. You will often be the view of what the problem is. They're often completely incapable of self-reflection or understanding. Public humiliation, and this is not always present before litigation because there's often not a setting for it, but it is usually what will follow immediately at the time of commencement or after litigation begins, whether or not they're the ones who started it or you started it. And gaslighting, as I talked about before, is a form of projection. Gaslighting comes from a phrase of an old movie, may have even been by that name. And what gaslighting is it's not just necessarily a projection, but it's where they so convincingly convince you that you are the problem. It's not them, that you are the crazy one, to put it bluntly. So, oh no, here we go again. Acting in versus acting out. And again, like I said, I hate to sound like a broken record. The webinars I've done in the past, I go through the different types of borderline personality disorders, but essentially they're going to be, I think there's 4 main types, but there's 2 general characteristics or classifications: acting in versus acting out. The acting in is where their mood swings, their difficulty in conduct is inside or towards them. They are sort of the subject of it, meaning they'll have emotional outbursts, they'll have highs and lows, they will use severe guilt as a method of usurping power and control over people. So the conduct and the severity of their mood swings are in their own conduct and their own mannerisms. Whereas acting out is where it's focused and directed towards another party, which is usually the intimate party, the other spouse or parent in most cases. So the main characteristics will either focus on themselves, overly emotional, severe crying, and the acting out will be very verbally and physically abusive, for instance. What to look for. And again, like I said, a lot of people don't realize until you start looking back over things what there really was to see. First, there's going to be excuses. One, for their conduct. Again, the more abusive, the more the excuses you will have. Now, that also brings in the nature of domestic violence. Again, a topic outside of the scope of this, but also one I've done numerous webinars on. The cycle of violence will also generate a lot of need for the excuses that you will encounter in dealing with a borderline personality or a narcissist. Parental unfitness allegations, that will usually start towards the commencement of litigation, whether you've actually begun it or gone into it or they're contemplating it. If these start to arise in a relationship after some time, it's a good conclusion that they may be contemplating their own type of litigation, and that's why these allegations are now surfacing. But again, in hindsight, or if you start to look for what to look for now, you'll start to see these kinds of issues getting sprinkled into your relationships. Mood swings, as I mentioned before, the acting in personality disorders, histrionic, for instance, is one example. They'll have very high, low emotions. They may burst out in tears over the simplest of incidences. A narcissist may become so verbally abusive over the simplest of issues, and they will often have significant mood swings, often unjustified or not justified. I guess there's never really a justification, but sometimes they come out of nowhere. You can't even understand what the trigger was for. I'm sorry, I don't know what the PowerPoint problem is today. Controlling. In my experience, all of these personality disorders that you will learn about if you go to my other webinars are a mode of controlling, whether they're using their own personal emotional outbursts or they're using verbal or physical abuse. It's all a form of controlling. Gaslighting, projection, all is directed at controlling or limiting the other person's behavior. Eggshells, that's what people respond. When I say what to look for, you want to look for this in yourself. It's commonly what I hear people say, well, I always felt like I was walking on eggshells. I never knew what his or her response was going to be at the end of a day or if dinner wasn't ready. Idolization, devaluation. Again, the idolization is obviously directed towards themselves and devaluation usually at you or at the other party. Most BPDs, borderline personality disorders, have a very strong need to remain consistent with their own identity. So their idolization of themselves, anytime there's an attack to that, it will generally lead to a very harsh response. The devaluation is usually the beginning of it, but again, depending on the severity of the individual will determine the severity of the responses that you will get. What to expect? Expect to be blamed in and out of court to you, to your family, for every single problem. Again, I said, as I said a moment ago, their need to preserve their identity, and their identity could be as a good father, their identity could be as a good spouse or wife or an employee. Anything that challenges it, attacks that, so they can't, again, reflect. They have no self-reflection, so they will blame you for any problems that are perceived. Be assertive and defensive. This is for those of you that are here to understand how to deal with a spouse. This is what to expect that you'll need to do. And it's a balancing game. That's why I say both, because you need to be assertive. You can't sort of be, no offense, like a washcloth and let them walk all over you. And you need to be defensive because you can't be too strong. You can't be on the attack, because once you attack a person with a borderline personality disorder, the level of attack that you wage will result in the equivalent or greater response. So it's a balancing act between how you assert your positions, but how you also defend yourself when dealing with them. And again, these tips aren't necessarily just meaning in court, but as you're dealing with your interpersonal relationships as well as your legal relationships. Don't try to be the reasonable one. And this is what I tell a lot of people, and this goes even beyond dealing with a borderline personality, even if you just have somebody who's difficult or unreasonable. Most people that I speak with, they believe that everybody acts like they act. So the average person will believe if they accommodate a request or if they forgive some bad conduct, that they'll get that in return, so that when they need a request, the other person will be reasonable. If they do something wrong, the other person will forget it or forgive it. And that's not the case with a borderline personality disorder or a narcissist or any of these individuals. It's almost the opposite effect. What you're really doing is, if you are reasonable, if you forgive bad conduct, if you are overly accommodating, you're rewarding their bad behavior and it reinforces it. So if they refuse to bring the child back at the end of parenting time and make you come and pick him or her up, even though they were supposed to drop it off, if you go to pick up that child, instead of expecting later that if you have a pickup and drop off problem, they'll come and help you, they will continue to make you come and do the pickup because they've learned that their behavior has worked. So don't try to be the reasonable one. You will not receive it in return. Expect and gross exaggerations. Gross exaggerations. And we'll talk a little bit more about the exaggerations. But when I say gross exaggerations, you really need to be prepared for the partner that you share, the individual we're talking about, to come up with things that almost shock your conscience. Again, it all goes to the premise of their need to protect their identity, that as soon as you put any kind of chink into that armor, they're going to lose it, and they'll come at you with things that you would never have imagined they could possibly say. And we'll talk about in a second how to safeguard about that. I'm going to switch over 1 second just to check in. Can somebody type and let me know that you still have been seeing the presentation until the moment now I just switched over? I want to make sure that the visuals are good. Somebody just take a second, type into the question box so I can ensure that everybody sees this. Like I said, I've never had this problem. I've been doing this for years. Not really sure what's even causing this problem, but I want to make sure that you're not missing anything. All right, so somebody just said they're not seeing the presentation now, but were you seeing it before I asked you? It was my question, because I just turned it off. Can you see it now? Okay. So here we go. Back. Sorry about this. Like I said, the PowerPoint is here. If the recording, I've recorded this, so if the recording is getting all of these slides, you will be able to view this on my website in a matter of days or weeks. So going back to what to expect, hopefully the information is going to help you, even if the slides are messed up for some reason. False allegations, it's sort of what I was saying before with the gross exaggeration. It's kind of a shade of gray between what's a gross exaggeration and a false allegation, but allegations relate to court, police involvement, which can lead to very significant consequences. The gross exaggerations could be in any kind of context. It could be between the two of you. It can be on Facebook, social media. False allegations, really, I'm talking about when you get into court, when there's any kind of law enforcement involvement, you can expect false allegations, and you should be prepared to address them. And we'll talk about that when we get to that part, if the slides ever move. Well, law enforcement involvement goes again back to this false allegations and obviously the picture that I put here. Don't underestimate their ability to use whatever force they can obtain. Their judgment is often greatly impaired. So it could be something simple like there's a pickup and drop off time that's confused, or you believe that they don't have the weekend. And instead of just calling their lawyer on Monday, they show up with the police. Despite the trauma that could possibly cause for the children, they'll go to that extreme over something so simple because it's the only way that they know how to handle conflict. Egregious lies. I'm flipping over that. Sorry, I think we already covered it. And because of the problem I'm having with the slides, I don't want you to keep reading the same ones over and over again. Preparation before and after. And the reason I say this, and that's part of the reason why I changed the title to this, is most of you that have these problems, I want you to be prepared for your litigation. Obviously, that's going to be very significant. But more importantly, your relationship is likely to continue afterwards. If you have children, obviously it's going to continue for a very long time afterwards. And what I'm talking about here, to prepare you for the litigation, it's important that you note that you need to continue to do these things even after your litigation is over, because it's quite likely you're going to have future litigation with these individuals. Not only, again, with parenting time issues, but if you have even just an alimony obligation and you have no children, you're still likely to have ongoing problems. So when I talk to you about preparation before and after, they're the same thing. So let me start to tell you some of the things that you should be doing. Keep copies of everything. You want to document everything. Not just records and account statements and report cards. You want to document everything because you never know what's going to happen in your future. Now, this is going to sound very taxing to most of you who have probably enough to handle in your day-to-day life, especially if you're dealing with children and this individual. But as I said, you want to do before and after. You want to document every single thing you can. Record whatever conversations you can. You are allowed to record a person's conversation that you are a part of, even without them telling or without them knowing. So you can record your conversations with your spouse or the other parent. I usually tell my clients, record every time you're there, and if nothing important is said, delete it so you don't need to save it. Get a dictaphone, a little Radio Shack one that sits in your pocket, digital. Record every conversation, delete it if it doesn't say anything. Get a Google Calendar or some kind of calendar. Note every time there's a parenting time issue, an exchange problem. Note every time there's a conversation that's significant. These records will be admissible in court, but more importantly, you can use them also to remember everything that's going on so that you're not caught off guard. Talk to friends and witnesses. And you want to do this for a couple reasons. One, you need to find out sort of who's on your side and who's not. And that's probably not the best way to phrase it, but more often than not, there's a couple issues that go on in a relationship with a borderline personality disorder, a BPD individual. One is a lot of the bad conduct happens at home or behind closed doors, so nobody else sees it. So a lot of times when you go to share things with people, they think you're the crazy one. They can't understand it. But also, many of these BPDs are very charismatic. They're often very successful in their careers. A lot of times they have a great deal of energy to focus onto these areas, so they're quite successful. And it doesn't match people's image when you start to tell them of the things that this person does behind closed doors or the things that this person says. And the people that you're talking to may be the ones that you need later in court to stand up as witnesses. Remember, I said before, what you're going to expect are gross exaggeration, lies, and false allegations. So you need to be prepared before and after with people who will be able to speak on your behalf and counter the allegations before you even have them lodged against you. So that's why I'm saying it's preparation. Get these people now before. If you have children, find people that know that you're a great parent. Find people that know that he's not a good parent, or he or she. And I'm not trying to be, gender specific. It's just easier that way. But again, if you have children, get witnesses that will tell you what your parenting was like. If you have problems at home, domestic violence, find people that are witnesses to it. Get the documents. If you've been to the police in the past, get copies of the reports. Get all these things now. And if they come up later, get them and keep them later, because they're always going to become possibly something that you need to rely upon. Seek therapy with somebody experienced in BPD. This is important, and it's going to relate to another topic I think I get to right next. You're going to need somebody to help you through this. And one is going to be a therapist. The other is going to be an attorney, obviously, and that's not because I am an attorney, but because I know what it's like to litigate. But you're going to need somebody to be able to talk to, but somebody that has experience in these kinds of disorders. Don't recommend a marriage counselor, because again, he or she will be involved in it. But you need to get somebody who's going to be able to really understand the issues that you're dealing with, and they're very specific ones. Interview lawyers who have high conflict or borderline personality disorder background. And I say that not because I am one, but because I've seen over the years, the reason why I've taken so much time to devote to these areas is, shockingly enough, the courts are not prepared to deal with these types of individuals. These, believe it or not, are the aberrations. The average case that goes through family court doesn't have these kind of personality conflicts. We all believe that every case is like that because that's what you see in TV and on the movies. But the average, tens of thousands of cases go through a judge's chambers before one with a BPD involved. And they're just not equipped to deal with it. So if you don't have an attorney that is familiar with how to approach it, you're going to find you're significantly disadvantaged almost every step of the way. Ask for predictable scenarios, and that's from the attorney and even from the therapist. You want to get a sense of what to expect, because you can't fight every battle. One, you can't do it mentally, and two, you usually can't do it financially, and you don't want to. You want to be able to pick your battles, but you need to pick carefully, because you might believe something is not a battle, and you may decide to forgo it being, again, the reasonable one, and it may be the very thing that comes back to haunt you later. So you really need to know what's going to happen in the future. And any experienced attorney in high conflict, let alone BPDs, but high conflict alone, should be able to foresee the issues that are going to rise during and after your litigation when you describe the individual that you're dealing with. Shut down internet networking pages. The problem with the internet, and I put this in my retainers to all my clients, it does a lot of things and people don't realize it. First of all, it arms them with information, not just with things that you're posting, what you have to say, but it's putting the location of where you are. It's putting the background of who's there. It's allowing other people in your life to put up comments about that you might not want shared. It's also going to allow the people in your life who may be doing things that you're not crazy about or that may not look good in a court to be posted onto your page, and you have no control over a lot of this information, and it can't be deleted. It's against the law to delete information from a social networking site that may be evidence in your case. So I tell people, if you're in a high conflict case, whether it's a BPD issue or just high conflict domestic violence, shut down or stop all of your social networking, because there's no good that will come from using it. So let's go into some tips kind of revolved around it. Minimize contact. A lot of people in relationships with these individuals are so, I hate to say trained or conditioned to be on the defensive, that they continue to do it even when the relationship has been ended, has terminated, it's in litigation or it's over. They find it almost impossible to ignore a text message, and you might get 10 of them in an hour. You might get 50 emails, and they're always piercing and probative and aggressive. I tell my clients, you don't have to answer them. You might want to answer once in a while, because you might want to be able to say to the judge, hey, I tried to answer, here's my response. It wasn't good enough, so I stopped. But you don't need to answer them. Most of what they're going to do isn't going to be relevant. It's not going to be harmful. If they say something harmful, or that you feel they're saying something like the false allegations, you may want to respond, but you respond simply like, that's simply not true, and I'm not going to even respond in greater detail. But minimize it. Only respond when you need to. You want to train them that they can't get the reaction that they're accustomed to, and that way they'll change or stop their behavior. Vanilla communications, when you do have to communicate. Like I just said, just write back, hey, that's not true and I'm not going to respond to this anymore. Or I've had it with these conversations, I'm not responding to anything any longer. Or simply, that's not true, but that's what you do to me. You write these false messages all the time. Simple, short, and vanilla. You don't want to attack them. You don't want to leave a horrible voicemail about how rotten of a person they are, because they will use that against you later. You want to be unemotional, vanilla, and simple in your responses. Plan for the worst. As I may have been intimating throughout this whole thing, the severity of what they will come to you with is going to be unforeseen by you unless you have a lot of experience and insight into the person you're dealing with. But that usually isn't the case. It'll be things that you would never believe could be said against you. And if you're not prepared for the worst that could be said against you, you're not going to be prepared when it is said against you, which is what I've been leading up to all this time, is documenting things, getting your witnesses. You want to make sure you have people that will say that you've never sexually molested your children, because those are the kind of allegations that come up. And you need to be prepared to say, that's just ludicrous. Not a defensive, not like, oh my God, I would never do such a thing. Your defense is, that's ludicrous. Here are 10 people who would tell you that that's just simply ludicrous. Document everything. Made that point, I think, already. Respond to frivolous with accurate, again, non-defensive responses. And it goes to what I said in the vanilla conversation, but I really need to stress these points because they're very difficult to deal with because you have such a history and you're so accustomed to responding in a certain way. And you need to carefully balance, because you can't leave certain things open, but you don't want to bring on another battle by fighting back and pouring gasoline on the fire. So you want to respond to it, again, assertively and defensively, but as needed. And again, this is why you should have professionals kind of in your corner before you start to have to address these issues. Never admit mistake. Again, this is another shade of gray to that. Don't be the reasonable one. And even if you made a mistake, that's great. And you can acknowledge it to yourself. But don't put it in writing. Don't put it in an email. Don't think that because you're owning up to your shortcoming that they too will own up to theirs. It goes back to what I said before. They will be rewarded for bad behavior and use it against you. They will not use it as a sign that they too should come forward and admit their shortcomings. So never admit it, and certainly never put it into a writing, like an email or a text message. Custody. Now here's an issue again. Now whether it's a family law matter or a divorce case, custody is an ongoing battle when you have a BPD or narcissist that you're involved with. So we'll talk a little bit about that. A lot of the things are going to be similar, but it's always good to bring it up in the type of custody issues. Stop trying to co-parent. Now, every judge in every court will tell you the opposite and would give me a load of crap for telling you this, because everybody wants everybody to co-parent, and they believe, and rightly so, that children are benefited by having both their parents in their lives. The problem is when you're dealing with an individual, and again, this is not intended for people who have like a narcissistic tendency. This is intended for somebody who is a narcissist. This is somebody who has a borderline personality disorder, other disorders like schizophrenia, whatever the issue could be, is what this is intended to address, not just people that are annoying or problematic. So you stop trying to co-parent because you won't be able to. It goes back to you give something thinking you're going to get it, and that's simply just not the case. Therapy, just like I said that you should have a therapist, you want your child to have a therapist to deal with these issues. And if you haven't begun the litigation yet, it's the best time to get your child into a therapist, because you have the ability to do it without having the other parent's agreement or consent or even notice. If you don't have a custody case filed or you're not in a divorce, you're allowed to do whatever you want with your children so long as it doesn't harm them. For instance, little side topic, people think you can't leave the state of New Jersey with children without consent. That's not true. You can't leave the state if you have litigation pending. If you don't have litigation pending, you can move wherever you want. If you have litigation pending, you're supposed to ask the other parent about a therapist. You're supposed to involve them in the selection and in the process. But if you don't have litigation, you can bring them to any therapist you want. And you want to do that for two reasons. one, you want to make sure they get into a therapist that has the background to address these issues. And two, you want to make sure that they begin the therapy and stay in it long enough so that a court's going to be reluctant to take the child out of it, even when the other parent says he or she didn't know anything about it. Because the issue then becomes the harm to the child. What's best for the child? Well, if the child's been in therapy for an established period of time and it's going well, it's unlikely a judge is going to take the child out because the dad didn't know about it or the parent didn't know about it. So you sort of sneak in the back door to get your child to therapy that you may not otherwise be able to get by agreement. Parental alienation. This probably should have been under what to expect, but I put it here because parental alienation, it's a common concern. It's a very big buzzword. Parental alienation takes a very long time to achieve. So those of you that are concerned that it's happening in your case or an early stage, it's probably not, but it's probably the beginning of it. An active parent can never be alienated. So even if you're the non-custodial parent and the custodial parent's attempting to alienate your child, if you stay active, if you stay in your parenting time schedule and you stay in your litigation, it's never going to happen. But they're going to try to, so it's something you need to be on the lookout and early on enough to address it. And if you are in a situation where it's progressed to the point that there may be, in fact, alienation, you don't want to attack it from the point of the parent's so bad he's alienating the child or he or she's alienating the child. Take the child away, let's change custody. Again, you need to make the argument focused on the child. So what you would do, for instance, is you want to appoint an alienation reunification therapist to work at eliminating alienation, reunifying the family so that you're focused on the child. That will usually be a successful approach as opposed to asking for a change of custody. That's just going to disrupt the child. So be prepared if you have custody issues to watch for potential alienation actions and how to address it best, again, before and after your case. Guilty is how most parents feel. This goes to the gaslighting, the projection, the conditioning that you are the cause of these problems. It is often very effective. And because you're obviously going to care so much about your child, it's going to leave doubt as to whether or not you're doing the right thing. I've had a lot of people come to me in the worst of circumstances dealing with narcissists or physically abusive people, and they don't leave because they feel bad taking their child out of the situation or away from one other parent. It's common. It's generally not any better for the child to be in this kind of circumstance to begin with. So it's something you need to address, and it probably would be good something to address with the therapist if you take my advice in that direction. Unfit. The allegations that you're unfit. You may even start to feel that you're unfit. Again, it all goes back to the conditioning. And a lot of times you'll go into court, and if you're not prepared to address these issues, they come back and either the judge starts to think you might be unfit, the allegations may start to stick because they're being presented in a much more powerful way than your response is. So again, without the preparation, this is something that's going to become an issue on both sides of your parenting issue, yours and the other parents. So again, that's it. I did move kind of quickly, and I do apologize for the PowerPoint problem. I have no idea what that is. I do have the other webinars I mentioned. Some of you I saw signed in late. There's at least 2 webinars on my website under my webinar archive page, Divorcing a Narcissist and Divorcing a Narcissist and Other Borderline Personality Disorders. The one with the simpler title is probably the more informative. It was the first one I did. But the second one's also very helpful. So let me see if anybody here has any questions. Like I said, when I set up, I will take as much time as needed. Okay, so there are some questions up here. Great. All right, so let's look at the first one here. And I'm just going to read the quote because I forgot to mention this when we set up. I don't think anybody can see anybody else, so nobody knows that you've signed on. So I'm going to read the comments without anybody's name attached to it so that you'll know it's your comment. And that way, if there's maybe a typo or missing words, I can kind of get some clarification as I read through the questions. So, my ex presented lies and fraudulent documents to the court, including tax returns. I can't imagine doing this. It's shaking me to my core. Trial is Tuesday. Does this happen often? You know, I'm going to say no. It actually doesn't happen often. First of all, fraudulent documents to the court are rare. I mean, sorry, let me answer this differently. In the average case, it doesn't. In cases of borderline personality disorders, yes, it's quite common. A BPD case is not common. So again, out of every 10,000, you may have 10, but of those 10, I wouldn't be surprised if a third of those had document problems. Your trial's Tuesday, so there's not much that you can do about that. If you could show something even after your trial that shows that those documents were fraudulent, then you would not only have a reason for a new trial, but you would also have the judge probably compelled to report the other party for criminal violations and criminal sanctions. Now, also, once your case is over, your right to get discovery is ended. So what I would have recommended sometime earlier is to subpoena the IRS for his or her master. Yeah, you said it's your husband, your ex. So the IRS has a master file, which is a printout of all the information that was filed in other documents, so that you can match up to the documents he presented to show the judge that they were fraudulent. Now, you can't really get that information after your divorce because discovery is over, but you would have the ability to file a motion for post-judgment discovery if you can show the judge that you have strong reason to believe information presented at the trial was false or fraudulent or altered in some way. I certainly hope you have an attorney. There is always a chance that your case settles, even though there's a trial on Tuesday. 99% of all cases settle before trial. Of the 1% that go to trial, usually 98% of those settle in the middle of trial or right before it. So there's still some hope. I generally would say don't let the fear of trial scare you into a settlement, because you'll just come out with a bad settlement and no appeal rights. You're almost better off to get a bad decision from a judge than enter it one by yourself, by your own agreement. So I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, post up another comment as I go through the other ones that are up here. So there's the next question. Do character letters of reference help? Generally, no, because a letter is not admissible in court. You need to have live testimony. But it doesn't hurt to get these in advance, preferably notarized, one, so you have them and you know who you can rely upon. And you can also attach them if you're filing a motion. Technically, the court rules say you can't rely on hearsay documents in a motion. But in my opinion, everything that's attached to a motion is hearsay in one form or another. So I would get them. Certainly doesn't hurt you to have them. I'd attach them. Judges are human. So even if the court rules technically say they're not supposed to review them, I think they do. The appellate division even had some cases come down where they said the judge is supposed to review everything submitted, even if it's not in the proper form, even if it's out of time. You know, the concept is the court wants to have one determination. They want to make it fair and they want to make it accurate and they want to make it one time. So they should be reviewing everything that you give them. So the short answer is yes, it can hurt to have them. Oh, and then, okay, so the second part is, do you need affidavits or actual witnesses? And the answer is yes. You do need actual witnesses, especially at a trial. If you're going to a domestic violence trial, which they come up often, plenary hearing on custody, or even a final divorce trial, you will always need the actual witness. Even if it's for documents like a bank statement, unless you have the other side agree that it's a bank statement and they'll let it in, you may need to get somebody from the bank to say that it's an accurate document, it's a business document, or get it certified. Now that's going a little further than you probably need to have, and there generally is going to be some flexibility to those because obviously you're not going to have somebody from Chase Bank come in, but it's good to know that this is a problem that you need to address before it. All right, so now it says, have a brother divorcing I'm assuming it's NARS narcissist. He and his wife have legal guardianship. You have a brother divorcing a narcissist, so she's a narcissist. He and his wife have legal guardianship of their granddaughter. The mother of the child, my brother, want me to assume the legal guardianship. Okay, well, depending on where that case is docketed, because that sounds like it could either be in the family court or in the probate court, depending on the guardianship. But I'm imagining it's in family court. Depending on whether the natural parents are consenting to this or not, they may be able to do it. I mean, if they're the ones that have guardianship, then they should be the ones charged with making the decisions that are best for the child. And if they think a new guardian is best for the child, then they have the right to make that decision. ultimately the court gets to pass on that decision. So it could be presented. You could do it by a consent agreement. You can do it by a motion. Ultimately, the court has to decide, but you certainly do have the right to make that motion or to file that consent order. So the next thing, so this is, I'm going to read this. This is several comments from the same person. So I'm going to read through the comments, make sure I get the whole situation before I address each one. Then it says the narcissist wife is going nuts, filed order of protection. It's common. Against my brother, get him removed from the house, isolated in child smear campaigns. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a typical narcissist. Should I assume the guardianship, but now to save the child? Yeah, it's a hard can't. Well, wait, there's one more comment. The grandmother, severe alcoholic, substance abuser. Yeah, well, that's common too, because another side point, you'll often find when people have a borderline personality disorder, there's usually a thread running through their family of other members that have it. And they often self-medicate because in order to get medication for these issues, they'd have to acknowledge that they have a personality disorder, and few people will do that. That's why, like, for instance, not just a different topic, but like schizophrenics very rarely will take their medication because then it's acknowledging that they're schizophrenic. So they will have to self-medicate. And same with a borderline personality disorder. And if their family has it, like their parents and their grandparents, this was also at a time where these kinds of disorders weren't acknowledged, they weren't discussed, everything was kept behind closed doors. So they were forced to deal with it themselves, and self-medication was the drug of choice, the method of choice. So that's what the people that we're dealing with today were raised with, and they have the same issues, so they're repeating the same conduct. So going Child Protective Services says they can't do anything. Well, that's bull. That's what their job is. Petition to change guardianship has been filed, and the court has yet to set the date. We see the petition to change guardianship sounds like you're talking about probate, but you just might be using commonly understood phrases that might not really apply to family court. Because if you're talking about a minor child in family court, it's custody, not guardianship. And I say that because if you go to court and you say guardianship, they're going to send you in an entirely different direction than if you say custody. So your question was, should you do that? I can't answer that. That's a personal choice. I can tell you that you need to balance your ability to deal with the parents against your need to care for this child, because you're going to now deal with not only all the things that I described in this webinar, but you're going to be denied the years of exposure that most people have. So like, let's say, your brother or whomever spent years with this woman and understands how bad she can be when he elects to file for divorce or for custody. That person, that scenario, they have some understanding of what they can expect, or at least they can look back and see what was going on. You're stepping into an unknown, and it's going to be that much more difficult for you. But I'm not trying to dissuade you. The care and love of a child could be far greater than anything you're going to have to deal with there. But it's just really not a legal question that I could help you with. Maybe a therapist could. So I can just wish you good luck with that. Okay, so it's family court. Okay, so it's custody. And I said, just because you want to use the right phrases, because people in the court system, they try to be helpful and they think they know the law, but they don't. So they'll advise you wrong. And if you give them the wrong words, you'll end up in the wrong place. Are there any other questions? All right, I'm going to just launch a couple questions, poll questions, just to get a sense of this webinar and your needs. So let me get a second here. Your answers, again, just like your participation here, is confidential. Nothing that you say or write will come up and show anybody. So just take a second to answer the webinar or the questions here. Assuming you can see this, that is. Okay, well, it's good to know at least how everybody heard this. So next. Is this a good time? Okay, so we have an abundance of yes, and unfortunately a good percentage of no. Those that said no, if you wouldn't mind, you should have my email from the announcements. Send me the emails to why and what time might be good so that I can kind of keep logs as we go through to see how I can best accommodate people. Okay, that I'm not going to present. There's just no reason for it. Now this one, I didn't retitle the question because, again, I didn't limit this to divorcing because I think the issues are germane everywhere, but eliminate divorcing. Just did we answer your question? Did I answer your questions? Okay, good. If you get more afterwards, certainly just, you can always email me. And last one, again, this one I'm not going to post. This is just so I know if there's anybody that is interested that would need to speak about these issues or any issues for that matter. Okay, I'm going to close that again. No need to post that. I can see the answers. Those that need to, I'll do my best to reach out to those. I have most of the contact information. Certainly are always free to call the office and schedule a meeting. You can tell them that you came to me through this webinar and we'll waive the consultation fee so that it's easier for us to meet. That being said, I thank you all for coming. My next webinar should be, as a matter of fact, let's do this. Let's see if it's posted on my website while I have everyone's attention to give you the next date and time. So let's take a look at it. By the way, the webinars I'm talking about here, my webinar page, if you go to Webinar Archive, these are all the webinars I've done in the past by topic. So in here you have divorce. This is what I found: divorcing a narcissist and divorcing a narcissist coping with borderline personality disorders. This is the first one I did. So this one goes a little deeper into it, but I really think this is the best one to start with. Then you have family law, estate planning, and else. So let's take a look at what the next one is on my calendar. So men's rights, divorce, and complex custody issues. Not just limited to men's attendance. I do address it from a man's perspective. I will at some point in the future do one from a woman's perspective too, but I think it benefits everybody to listen to it so that at least you know which side of the argument you're on, what you're going to see, and what you need to anticipate. So hopefully I'll see everybody there. Well, I won't see anybody there, but hopefully you can register and attend there. If there's anything that you believe you would like me to address at that webinar, you can certainly email me or call me with a topic or a question now. I'll either address it to you beforehand if I can, or incorporate it into the webinar if I think it's also going to help there. So that being said, again, I hope this helped you. I can't urge you enough to go to my website to watch the other webinars. Like I said, this was just, and it took an hour, and I was just touching on the basics here, what you need to know. But the other ones go really in depth about the different types, the different definitions, the different conducts, the similarities and differences. Really, really will get you prepared for the individual you're dealing with. This was just an overall general approach for all of you. So good night, and I will hopefully speak to you all soon.